we were going to have this gathering as part of our block party, following up on our first annual Hope Symposium last year. This is going to be our second annual Hope Symposium as part of the block party, but it is freezing outside. So it's too cold, so we decided to move it indoors. And there's still the bounce house out there, and some children are bouncing in with their sleeping bags, but we're in here with our
Nice and cozy.
nice and cozy. One thought that's really been on my mind a lot about hope is that quote about, I try to write a little bit every day without hope and without despair. And we've talked in this group about how hope and despair are so closely connected. And I found a quote this morning, it's a Buddhist saying, hope and fear chase each other's tails. And so this idea of hope being, so intertwined with despair, fear, and so the idea, I think, my idea was like that, staying the course, like that you both hope and despair and fear and despair are destabilizing. And that's why we try to write a little bit every day without either, is because it's destabilizing, and in order to, kind of stay the course, you have to put both aside. And so that was one of my thoughts. And then another thing, I heard on NPR an interview with a General Motors striker just the other day saying, I have to be optimistic. I have to be, because anything else just makes it bad. And it's not. We're making history, and we're making everybody's life better. And then the interviewer said that this striker hopes the strike results in better pay and better job security, especially for GM's temp workers. And in the end, he thinks the eventual agreement will set a standard for other workers outside the union. That, he says, would be worth the difficulty of living on $250 a week. So this idea that, we do things that are difficult because we think, because it's too horrible to think there wouldn't be, there's not the possibility of something good happening. That just really struck me as this guy out there saying, I have to be optimistic. So anyway, so we've been meeting and talking about hope, and one thing we could do today is talk about, I think Bill and Denise both suggested we talk about where we've come in our thinking about hope over the past year or so. Lou has been developing his thesis.
That's right.
And, I guess mine is that putting both hope and despair to the side in order to be stable in the present is the best course.
Well, I'd like to hear from Lou early on, since I think you have a very deep interest in this topic, and maybe it will help inspire us.
Wow. So set me up there. I don't know how inspired
At least he hopes
early on, we had the conversation. So it's changed because of actually some of the things we've talked about. And I still believe, though, that hope is pretty much useless, and that that hope gets in the way of our people making actual practical actions in terms to improve their life.
It gets in the way of?
Of living a better life.
Uh-huh.
That many times the hope that emerges is somebody else's hope for you, and it's their way of defining what you should be going forward about, and how you should proceed and the like, as opposed to hope being generated by conversations and hope that's more organic and connected to your own life. And so I think my research is on Italians and immigrants, and they were given a lot of hope in terms of the American dream, and here's what your life can look like. But I think that in that sense, hope was used to control them, as opposed to hope being used as a way forward to live a better life. It was the people who were here, their hope for you to sort of mold them into what the American culture wanted them to be like, as opposed to being a real sort of melting pot. And so I think that hope has its uses, but I think historically, hope is a tool that's been used by people to discipline and control other people. And it's particularly pernicious because it gets into us. That hope is not something that's just out there. It is something that we identify with. We have an emotional experiences with hope. And so once you ingest someone else's hope, then it's hard to sort of get rid of it. And so it becomes part of you in some ways, but you become part of what other people want you to be. So that's playing with that idea, and I've had some discussions we've had here about false hope and some ideas about people give you what they see as hope. And I just think we need more discussion about that.
So another person's hope for you could be positive or it could be negative.
Could be positive and negative, yeah, could be positive and negative, but I think historically it's been more negative. It's to sort of put you, it's been negative for the people that were here because it wasn't theirs.
So you're looking at a broader spectrum of the population rather than individuals.
But I think it works itself down to the individual.
Yeah, I think, isn't it, haven't you heard it 1,000 times growing up? Well, I hope you're going to be this, and I hope you're not going to leave your faith or religion, or I hope you're, whatever, I mean, isn't that just so classic? I mean,
It's sort of a gentler way of
Commanding.
commanding
It is
somewhat.
classic,
But saying, you
exactly.
should be this, I hope you do this.
Right.
And in some ways it has the patina, this sort of thing of like,
Well, it's even worse then because you're like set up to not let this person down. You know, it's
That's
like
right.
rather than just disobeying a command, now you're really letting, going against, letting it down.
No,
It's
that's
to go against.
exactly
And
right.
we talked a lot about this in terms of our own personal lives, in terms of
Right.
parents and that
Right.
sort of stuff. And then you're going, you're going against when you go against the hope of your parents.
Right. That's
And you-
even worse than going against their command.
Yeah, because then it's,
Right.
then you carry it with you. You carry it with you, and we've had discussions here 40 years later. we're still dealing with the ideas of what our parents wanted us to hope that we ask. And you can't let children sort of things sort of determine what their life's going to be. But as competent adults, we should be able to have, I think, more say in what we want to go forward.
So you said that hope has its uses. I've never heard you say that. So
Well, I think part of the
could you-
discussion. I think here I've seen that hope
So,
is.
could
Like
you-
an energizer.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think if it's your hope, it is it is going forward, it is sort of giving you a goal to look into an uncertain future, if you have that idea. And if it comes, again, organically out of from your experiences, or you're connecting with your culture and your other experiences, then I think it is a positive sort of role. I'm not sure it's always.
So I think of
Yeah,
hope
okay.
can be positive in providing the energy. And like I grew up with parents that really never said what you're saying, I hope you do this, or I hope you're this or this. I didn't ever hear that message. And in some ways, I wish they had said that, because that might have spurred me to think a little bit beyond, or to act a little bit beyond. I mean, they were very, they were positive people, but sometimes if you say, hope can be something to make you go, or maybe you start running with it, it's not going the way you wanted, but perhaps you can veer off here and have another path or whatever. So in that sense, I think it can
I have a
spur people.
question.
Mhm.
Would it have been better for your parents to say, I hope you do blank, whatever the blank is, or have said, what is it that you hope you can do? And I'm, the
yeah, there's a
thinking behind my,
difference.
yeah, the
There's a
thinking my
difference.
question is why are we so arrogant that we can tell somebody else what they ought to hope for? It always occurs to me that we can, we can throw out advice, we can tell people where they should go, or what they should hope for. That's pretty arrogant, because we're not in their shoes. If we really want to encourage hope, or we really want a person to kind of think about it, and I think you're right, because my parents were kind of like yours. You know, they never said, well,
Well-
what do you wanna be when you grow up, or anything like
Yeah,
that. They would
and my
just,
parents never
like,
said that to me,
no guidance.
but I would also say this, being a female and kind of, you know, before Title IX, I think it is, you know, like, maybe if they had said something to that effect, maybe I would have strived a little more, because I grew up in a small, you know, town, and I didn't have those female, you know, role models, the doctor and the this and that. And, you know, my parents went to college, but they only had like a year of college, and so I didn't have that type of thing. So, I think in my case, it might have been a positive thing. I'm certainly not blaming them,
Yeah.
you know,
But
because they
I-
were great
But I
parents.
think that.
But I think
The
it's
question still
highly
remains.
individual. Hope is a highly individual
Exactly.
thing.
I don't think so.
How we
I don't
take
think
it
That's
it's-
and
why-
what we
that's
do
why I
with it.
asked
Wait,
the
one
question.
at a time.
That's exactly why I asked the question.
Yeah.
You know, like, would it have been better if they had said, what is it that you would hope for?
Yeah.
You know, and not maybe that directly, but there are a lot of little subtle ways that a parent
And
says
it's
to their
difficult
child.
retrospectively.
Yeah.
That would have
Where
been better if they
you
were.
Where are
were,
you going? What do you want to
You know.
do? What do you want to be? What,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
rather than, I hope you become a doctor,
yeah,
is what do you want to be?
yeah.
And it's. you
But
know,
that
it's
question
really-
can be fraught too, because, you know, what do you wanna be, and maybe you don't know.
That's
And it
right.
can be pretty devastating to have to admit that to your parents, that you don't,
Well,
or
and it-
someone else,
but
that
it
you
can
don't know,
also
you could
spur
feel.
you to start seriously
Yeah.
thinking about
It,
it.
it could,
Yeah, it does. I think it does. If it's housed in a non-pejorative,
Yeah.
open-ended kind of way, it's like, how many parents said to their children, how do you feel today? I mean, it's stupid.
But
little
children
question.
often hear, what a parent intends as
Yeah,
non-pejorative, as pejorative,
That's for sure.
at least in our experience.
But that's part of the problem, is I
I mean,
think
maybe
What-
Stefan can.
we're talking about
speak to
children
that
though,
more.
and I think children are by definition
Yeah.
unknowable.
Even-
Don't have knowledge, don't have a great deal of
Even
knowledge.
adult children, I
But
think,
that's different,
can
see?
feel a seemingly
Judged.
not, right,
Oh,
a
yeah.
seemingly neutral, non-pejorative can be taken the wrong way by a parent, because a parent is such an authority figure.
And I think it depends on situations, when it's presented, situations, experiences, tone, whatever, all these variables enter into
Yeah,
how we
you know,
perceive it.
Very nuanced situation.
Yeah,
I think I've said this before, but I wrestle with a definition that has us purely looking forward toward improving the circumstances of my life. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's maybe not quite a rich enough definition of what hope might be. I think, you know, thinking about what you said, Susan, about setting hope and despair aside to be in the present, I think I guess I might have a slightly different take on that. The ability to hold both hope and despair and be in the present. I think for me that's, and to have some sense that there could be meaning in that. Not to be so focused on what is ahead and where can I get and what will this be and how can I make things better for myself or my kids or whatever. But how can I be fully where I am right now with what is good and what is really hard, and trust that there is meaning in that.
I really like that. It's a challenge.
For me, it's a challenge. I feel like it's richer. Otherwise, if I get too like, well, where do I want to be and how do I hope to get there? I think I miss what's happening in my day to day, and I think I cheapen it almost. And I'm, you know, inclined to just muscle through and just push stuff out of the way, kind of not really living in the richness of what is here and now. Does that make sense?
No, exactly, that's a very good point, that we should be living in, all we have is here now, tomorrow never comes. When you wake up tomorrow, that's the day, you know, but that's actually a point I thought Lou made last year, which is something about that you then put off things, you know, you're willing to put up with everything because you hope it down the road, oh no, down the road, it's gonna be changed, you know, but yet you just keep, you know, slogging it through the mud, whatever it is you got right now, without you know, with just holding on to that, you know, that instead of actually actualizing yourself in the here and now, you know, let's have fun, let's enjoy life, let's live fully right here and now.
But I almost wonder too if we can give ourselves permission to not actually fully enjoy life from the here and now, because sometimes life is just really, really hard. And the fact that you can't fully enjoy everything,
Yeah.
I don't know if that means that
Yeah.
you
No,
don't
that-
have hope anymore. You know what I'm saying? I think
Yeah.
it's like, it's lived experience. It is actually okay, and to move into that with some fullness. I guess I don't think that that's anti-hope. I don't know.
It sounds as though hope has many faces.
But that's what I've taken from this group over the last year is how many different perspectives there are of hope. And, you know, I came into this with my one view of it being a very sort of internal thing. And then, you know, I've been introduced to this whole continuum of hope and of it being, you know, external, something that someone gives you or wants for you, and then, you know, the internal things that you want for yourself or you hope for yourself. And it's been so interesting to hear all these different perspectives and think about it from different viewpoints.
Well, I have to say, after reading some of your emails reporting the little bits and pieces about what's been going on, I've come to be discriminating about my use of the word hope.
Me too.
Yes.
I got love. My
So,
gosh.
I try to avoid it and put it in a more realistic way.
So can you give an example?
Well, let's see.
That's an interesting point, so.
Instead of saying, I hope you had a good time at the party, I could say, my guess is that you had a wonderful time at the party. You know,
What
just,
if they had a miserable time?
That was the party.
How was the party? I guess it was.
You don't need hope.
all right, very good. Keep that one in mind too.
It's a whole new lecture, whole new
Well,
lecture.
right, to be like neutral as much as possible.
No, you look terrible, you must have had a great time last night.
But I like Denise's point, because a lot of stuff that I do with the immigrants in Hope, it is sort of forward-looking. The idea is that you're here, but if you want to stay here and be considered an immigrant as opposed to an alien, that you have to sort of look forward, you have to sort of push forward and be successful and be like us. And so it was sort of like they were telling people to live the American dream. And so if you didn't ingest the American dream, then you weren't really like, you know, American. You were like still the, you know, isolated sort of, you know, you were in the Italian sort of enclave, and you weren't like really American. But that, I think you're right, is that my idea of hope was more tied to the future and how you can meld and assimilate in the future, is that you had to have your kid had to be successful, you had to be successful. But maybe you're right, maybe in the everyday life, that it doesn't have to be future oriented, it's living it. It's living hope,
Just
it's
for the
living the spirit
tape,
of death.
for the tape, Lou, you might want to just let the viewers know what immigrants you're talking about, not current immigrants.
Well, though, I think it has,
But I
it was
mean,
the Italian
yeah.
immigrants, beginning of the last century,
Right.
that last century, but I think it's so much will play over with Mexican
Right.
immigrants today.
No, I'm sure it is
Yeah.
applicable, but I just,
Yeah,
so
sure.
the
Yes.
audience would.
Well, speaking of populations, have you discussed, to those of you who have worked on this before, the role of hope among the prisoners in the concentration camps?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And what were your insights?
Well, we read the thing from
Yeah.
Art Inventing Hope.
Elie Wiesel, right,
Yeah.
right.
So hope to them was essential, useless.
I think it varied by individual, and,
I think.
no, you go ahead, because I don't really remember what that article, the Elie Wiesel article said.
Well, I
anymore.
remember where I was when I was reading
I
it.
remember
That's
where you were
right.
too.
We all know where we were. Yeah, that's right.
You were here discussing it, and I was by myself in a Whole Foods for work. I was just eating dinner and looking for something to do, sitting there by myself. And so I do remember reading it on my own, thinking of a group, you know, a subset of this group needing to continue these conversations and feeling somehow separate from that. I mean, not left out, I just was away on a trip, but knowing that there was a group together and that I wasn't there. And so I remember reading the themes of community in that essay, and the hope and relationships that have been formed with kids and family and things like that also. I just remember this knowing and being known kind of idea really coming from that piece. And I think I felt it all the more acutely because I was by myself and I wanted to be here discussing that with people, you know, the knowing and
That hope is intimately tied to community in some ways.
yeah, I think there were strong themes with that.
And in the concentration camps, they were so divided, even though they found hope, because they could, but they were so divided.
Because of each other.
Because of each other,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there's community in that place also, because there had to be, right?
Right, it has to be, right. But he had invented in a particular sense there.
Welcome, welcome.
Tony.
I'm so glad you guys.
There, you see Allison?
Yeah.
This is Tony.
Tony,
In your way?
Tony, some of them already have known about you, like I've mentioned you
Oh,
before.
yeah, your reputation precedes
Yes.
you.
So we caught him up on things, so
So
whatever you were
glad.
just talking about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we got
No.
started.
No,
Do we need to move any chairs or anything for the camera, or are you good?
No.
Oh, no.
so what were you just saying?
No, but actually, the point I think you were trying to make, I hope I heard this, but I guess I'll throw that in
Yeah,
here.
the hope here.
But, no, but with people, as long as they had some, hope in the concentration camp, they would live. But if you had destroyed all hope, then people might die. I mean, there's some article or something that I read once, where people, if every shred of, there's no doubt that you aren't going to survive, you have to take away every shred of hope, so to speak. Then people might just simply give up and die, versus, having, a sense of that we are going to make it, going to pull through.
But there was that quote I sent around last year from that guy who was held prisoner by the Somali pirates, and, for 2 years, and they would say to him, oh, you're getting out next month or next week, or, and he would get his hopes up, and then they wouldn't do it. They were kind of playing with him, and so what he concluded was it's possible to live without hope. Hallmark cards, whatever Hallmark cards say to the contrary, that he just kind of kept going. I think it varies by individuals. I don't think we can make one claim about the people in the Holocaust and how they managed hope, or what they were doing psychologically to get through that.
Yeah, something I've been learning about hope is like you guys, when you read something, like everything I see with hope, I read it, I'm interested, like, oh, what's this, what's that, or a podcast, or, so we all have longings, like we all want something to be different, or better, or we need something. So I think that's just like kind of part of the human experience, is to long for something. Like things are not perfect in this world, so we want things to be better, we want things to change, we want things to be redeemed, we want more beauty and less brokenness and things like that. So I think it's really human to want that, but we never have any guarantee of the things we hope for will ever change or will ever be different, right? So what do you do with that? So that's what I've been thinking a lot about is, okay, I can hope for something, and what if it never happens? So I think maybe this is a bit of what you're touching on too, is so how do we hope, but then still stay in the present? So I guess hope when I'm thinking about hope is a willingness to wrestle, is a willingness to say this is hard and to stay in there. And I think what we get when we hope and when we have this willingness to wrestle is we get that experience of wrestling and hoping and longing, and we find community with others. Or for people of faith, they get an encounter with God where they are not necessarily getting the things from God that they're hoping for, but they're getting that experience or that relationship with God. Or people without faith are doing that with other people. So I think the community aspect is, I think, a really important one. But but yeah, just the process of hoping and longing and not having any guarantees that anything will ever be better. So why do it? But there is a benefit to it. There is, I think there's a richness to interacting with others, a richness to struggling through it, and you know, for people who
We set unachievable standards that we will never make, but we would be awfully unhappy without having those standards
right,
that we always strive to get to.
yeah,
And you know, it's like equality, you know, everybody's supposed to be equal. Well, we know we'll never get there, but that shouldn't stop us from working towards that goal. And it's kind of an interesting
yeah,
play
yeah,
in our own heads. I think, you know, one of my hopes is that I'll be content. And then it occurred to me, well, when you're content, you die. So if you know, in a way, I mean, that's kind of like where you want to be when you die. You want to be able to say, you know, I'm satisfied with, you know, what's my life is given to me. And
I think people can be content in the moment, and
you can be content
You know,
at the moment, but I'm not talking about that
you
kind
mean,
Some deeper, broader kind of contentment?
of. Yeah,
that
like
beyond-
at peace with oneself about where we are. And, you know, and I don't think it's possible. It's like equality, you know, or like anything. It's like, do you ever really get there? And I'm not sure we really want to get there because we've got nothing left to do if we get there.
Yeah, it's kind of
People
like
find it.
total contentment, yeah, right. You know, one thing I want to say is our brother-in-law, who's a scientist, when I was talking to him a little bit about hope, his view was that it's evolutionary, that hope is an evolutionary adaptation, a survival adaptation because of the, you know, vast uncertainty and danger that surrounds us all, potential dangers that surround us all the time, that one who couldn't survive, that those who can deal with that better, more, you know, have the temperament and the wherewithal to deal with that anxiety and uncertainty, survived. And so it was selected for evolutionarily. So that's a really different view of it, and I think it's, you know, it's got some merit to
Susan,
it.
when you said that, it made me think of hope as stubbornness.
Stubbornness.
Like maybe the people that were, you know, in those evolutionary times, were just more stubborn and ornery, and that's what helped them survive. So maybe hope has some element of that kind of
Resiliency or something.
resiliency. right?
Resiliency is certainly, I think, another evolutionarily selected for quality.
Yeah, then we should talk about resiliency rather than hope, right? That's where we're instead of using the word hope in this sort of generic sort of way, if we talk about resiliency or stubbornness, that gets us more to the ground, right? In terms of what it takes to be successful and the like, or to move forward and like, as opposed to, I hope that I'm gonna be resilient, but in this way.
Right.
I think that makes it more meaningful, I don't know, more practical. And we talk about, you talk about your health issues and that sort of stuff, and being resilient and that sort of stuff. But it impressed me with what people were saying. Bill, and you talk about hope as being so much human, about being human.
Yeah.
You know, your humanness about it. And that's what sort of upsets me when other, if I'm right, I could be wrong, but when other people take away your hope, or give you your hope, they're taking away something that is your humanness in some ways. It's not just an idea that they're taking. They're taking about your ability to experience life in a particular way. When they say, well, here's how you have to experience, here's the appropriate way to experience it. And people can't do it totally. Other people can't get inside of you and just manipulate. But they can do it sufficiently, so sort of like, are you living their life or your life or the like? And that's the humanness about it that upsets me.
Yeah.
And whether it's, immigrants, whether it's, young children, that sort of stuff. And I think, and Tony, I know we're talking about, one of the things that I'm interested in is how hope is objectified how you can see hope in the world. You know, it's one thing to have it in your head, but it's another thing to see it, you know, in the outcomes of hope. And I always think about farming, and that each year, right? Each year is sort of like a new experience, right? I mean, you plant things in the ground, I don't know, with the hope that they're gonna grow the next year, especially when you live on that. But when they do grow, I mean, that's an objective sort of, and you actually see it in your own eyes, you know, hope coming to fruition in some, I use those terms, like fruition in some ways, right? So I think we all can't be farmers, you know, I'll go out and, you know, dig things in the ground and have hope. But I mean, in the worlds that we live, it's so hard to see hope because is it education? Is it getting an education? Is it a job? Is it a marriage? And it's hard to sort of.
Political activism.
Yeah.
You're getting anywhere with it? Is it?
Yeah, it seems like we're not, you know, we're not moving. But then I think farming would be hard.
Well, that
Because
is
every
so
year,
concrete.
but
It's
even-
so concrete.
But affirming.
Yeah.
Hard, it'd be very difficult, but affirming each year, right? Is that?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
you always have an ability to engage me, and I mean the word hope is as I listen to a discussion of it, it makes me realize that I've moved beyond it. That initially, you know, when we started farming started working towards having a farm 30 years ago, and it was a hopeless situation. I thought about hope a lot, but with every year, with all those seasons that you talk about, and living through hopeless situations, not having enough equipment, not having enough land, not having enough money for seed, and then weather and weather and weather and insects and markets. It's every year you survive something that seemed hopeless, and you get beyond it because your capacities to deal with hopeless situations, like you say, it affirms you. You just it becomes more a matter of trust. You know, you trust in that seed that it's going to grow. You trust that now you have irrigation, so if there's 7 weeks of drought, you can get through it. And now you have the equipment to do a scale that you can reach enough people, if you can find enough people to buy it. You know, and to me, after 30 years of this life, this vocation, to me it's much more dealing with hopeless situations and analyzing how to get out of this, how to get beyond this, how to deal with this, how to sustain. It's those words that, in the beginning, it was all about hopelessness, really, and hope and hopelessness, and this kind of falling back into one, but then getting a little more of the other, and then falling back into one. And whenever I feel hopeless, I go to Africa. I go to truly hopeless situations, and 7 times since 2012, I've gotten to go. And when you see truly hopeless situations, and people, the most joyful people you've ever met, ever experienced, ever enjoyed, and you look back at what you thought was hopeless in the USA, and you think, wow, that wasn't so hopeless at all. And here are these remarkable people, and you're humbled and shamed by them, and so, just so lifted up by them, you know, just. So I'm sorry if being the 1% farm population in the world, it's a little hard for me now to relate to discussion of hope, because life circumstances just, it was move on or die, and it wasn't contentment at all that would make you die, but it was giving up.
Well, I mean, I think
That was
What you-
beautiful.
yeah, thank
so
you
much
for that.
sharing that,
Yeah.
all of that.
I'm not sure it's completely at odds with everything that we're saying here about hope.
It, you know, it was making me think about, you know, I know this young man who had spinal cord injury, you know, in his early 20s, was paralyzed. And when I talked to him about hope, he described this continuum with hope on one end as kind of an emotional thing and strategies and logic on the other hand, and that he felt he was just way more at the strategies, logic part than the emotion part. And so, you know, that's kind of what you're saying. It's like, you know, hope is more the emotional thing, strategies, logic, figuring out, you know, what you need, you know, what's going to work. So that, you know, the ideas that you're introducing are not completely different from some of the things we've been thinking about.
When you live 100 miles out of an urban area and you drive through the rings of expanding development into a city which you know used to be like what I experienced 100 miles away from here, you realize how vocationally, you know, like he says, farming is different. It's most vocation is producing things or marketing, selling things, or financing things. And farming is all of those things, or it fails. And that's why a lot of farms have failed. There was the marketing element, the sales element was, you know, the supply chain got too distant and so impersonal that just like tweak some things, the situation, the dynamics just exterminated producers. And so I realize every time I come into the city how everything's specialized. You're either doing one thing or the other. You work somewhere where you produce things. And in the United States now, that's more and more servicing the things that are produced in another country. So it's real long supply chains. And my wife and I now just feel so out of touch. And we go into a city and we try to sell, try to market, or did, because now we're quit, transitioning out of that, and as we are in our 60s and realize that the time of incapacity is coming, and we can't do that physical work anymore, and but the sales and marketing is getting harder and harder and harder.
Is it realistic then to think of hope as a tool or a spur or a motivator to move us toward what it is that we hope for? But people don't ordinarily do that. Sometimes they just hope and let it go at that. Is that right?
Well, right, you have to take the steps to, I mean, it's a spark, but then you need the strategies, the logic, and the strategies.
Then you need to take the action.
I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying about you and your wife are aging and you realize that you can't do this work anymore. So is there any idea of hope or hopelessness? Does that enter into this at all?
There is fear, a lot of fear, but 30 years in this track has really made it more a matter of trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to trust. We got out of this predicament. We got through that, and it's become in us. You know, life is. It's not all. For a farmer, life isn't just human. It's a plant. It's a seed. It's the soil. It's life in the soil, and that's so much a part of us now that. And that process, trusting that process, and nurturing that process, and listening to it, and serving it, I mean really serving it.
Right.
And that's so much ingrained in us now, I think that, our situation, it's a new phase of hopelessness
Okay.
But
So I was bad. I look like I, you know.
That would be a great
Like
name
a
for a
cheerleader,
novel.
right, a cheerleader role.
That would be a great name for a novel, A New Phase of
Consider it
There you
taken.
go, maybe that's your
You can
type.
be impressed.
When you live with an author, everything's fair game. So,
Wait, well, there's
so, okay, so you're in a new phase of hopelessness and fear. It's on the horizon now,
yeah,
right?
but
Because you're still farming, right? You're gonna do it a little while longer.
we hope to hang on to it till we die, you know. But
You mean the farm itself?
yeah,
Okay.
and we have, you know, when we started, this is what we had,
Mhm.
and you work another job so that the kids are all fed and clothed, and as long as it takes till you have more than this, you have the tools, the equipment,
Right.
and the land, and
So you wanna hold on, your vision is that you and your wife will have your farm, but you won't be farming it?
well, it's finding new crops to sustain that land, that there will be no way on that scale of sustaining us.
Mhm.
So transitioning into reinventing ourselves in other ways. We opened a bed and breakfast,
Okay.
and my wife is really active in these agricultural women's groups, which is bringing workshops and teaching opportunities, and I'm going back now to those off-farm things that sustained us through the years that we bought equipment and learned to operate it, and built greenhouses and ran electricity and water to buildings, and kept reinvesting the money, reinvesting until it was self-sufficient. You know, but it's not self-sufficient, and it's outdated, and it's dwarfed in scale by agribusiness
Mhm.
and industrial practices. But it can still sustain us if we keep reinventing ourselves, and so there is tremendous fear, you know, because there's no pension. It's not
Right.
like there was never any money for pension,
Mhm.
but
So that land is what you, is what you
well, it's
have.
not even our land; it's rented land.
It's rented land, wow.
When those around us who bought this land, a good number of them are from Illinois, and they sold out to the subdivisions and
Right.
industrial parks and the expansions of the metropolitan area, and then moved out to where land was 800 an acre. But now I teach part-time, and I pass a tract of land around Platteville. There's a big sign, and as big as this wall, that says acre plots, $33,000.
Wow.
You guys, right?
We're in northern Wisconsin, I hear that.
That's 150 miles from where we're sitting. 150 miles.
Wow.
You know, this.
Is anyone buying them for 30?
Oh yeah. If you continue down the road, you see these
McMansions.
$250,000, which $500,000 properties, and a golf course. And
Wow.
people who have the means here can go up there and I was invited to this think tank in Libertyville 15 years ago, and they had done an inventory of the remnants of farmland around Chicago, and that 15 years ago, farmland for farmland's use was $65,000 an acre, and that was to keep it in corn and soybeans in the Chicago area, little, 20 acres here, 10 acres there, 5 acres here. What's a lot sell for now? People buy in Park Ridge, or,
They bought a house and tear it down.
yeah,
Yeah.
they pay for a little ranch, $250,000, tear it down, put up a $500,000 house, can do that. They have the means, the income. Could not do that in Florida,
But it's interesting, because when I know I'm just at scale here, but when I go in the springtime and plant my seeds, tomato seeds, and then, today, 3 months later, I get a tomato out of it. I mean, that makes hope real to me, okay? Because it's not my livelihood, It's sort of, for you're describing something that you're far more invested
Right.
in
It's
that
make-
sort of
make or-
thing happening.
Make or break.
We were planning.
But in some ways, it's I'm envious of that because it's more direct and it's
In
go
our-
back.
yeah,
But in some ways,
In our full seasons, we were planting 4,000 tomato plants. Foot apart and 200,
Not
150 foot growth.
Wow.
And getting to a point where we learned to sustain that, and then rotate that with 60 other crops, and it just, it's a lifelong investment in time and attention, and from it, I think, comes living hopefully despite hopelessness, because
Yeah.
we lived through 2012, record drought. We lived through, now it's 60 inches of rain, where average rainfall is 56. And that's an incredible, that's an incredibly hopeless
So do
situation.
you think,
Yeah.
When you have that
When
much
your
rain.
field
do you
is
think
flooded.
that the rest of us here are, I'm trying to figure this out. The rest of us here, are we over there? Are we over there with Tony, or we just don't realize it? I mean, are we there, but do we have these sort of layers in between where our lives are good enough and we have enough sort of resources in order to not really face? I mean, you're facing something that's pretty existential, right? I mean, it's like pretty. I mean, it's not just your livelihood; it's who you are and that sort of stuff. And I wonder to what extent, we just. And this sounds overly critical. We just avoid, in some ways, facing that sort of more clear, real humanness and that sort of stuff, because we don't have to, because we can put a number of different sort of.
Distract yourself in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And that are you the forefront of what we may come
Oh, I
to see as we would get older and resources
Well,
out
and
there.
the environmental
Well,
shifts. It's-
I don't think any of us are as well equipped as Tony to deal with, the dire straits he's talking about. I know, I don't feel I am. I mean, if I were suddenly put in your circumstances, I wouldn't be able to cope with it the way you can, because I haven't ever.
We all have life circumstances
Yeah.
that are, in our suburban life may make us feel some of those things too, so.
We have different survival skills, or we have different skills for coping with our lives and different layers of security. But our daughter used to have this boyfriend who, he was like living in a bus with his 2 dogs and like out on a piece of land somewhere. And I always used to say, if the grid goes down, he's the guy you want, because he knows how to grow food, he knows how to
That's what I
fix
say about
motors,
Tony.
he knows how to.
She's always trying to go to
I always
Tony's
say
house.
that.
But if the grid stays off, he's not the guy you want, because he doesn't have health insurance, he doesn't have, so.
Et cetera.
She moved on from him, so. But the thing about.
Were you hoping?
You guys got
that
numbers?
Oh, yeah,
Well, only if the grid stayed up. If the
we were-
grid went down,
we
we'd
were-
want him on our side.
We were saying spells and incantations and all kinds of.
So, I mean, you do
shenanigans.
have a set of skills that none of us have, and you're more in tune with the environmental shifts. I mean, you're facing those directly, and it makes me think of, the Greta Thunberg, the Swedish girl.
Yes.
Okay, and I heard her say, I mean, she's so like grim, and for good reason, but I heard her say, don't tell us you're putting your hope in us, the younger generation, she doesn't want to hear that. I mean, I know I sometimes feel that, that
Right.
like we put her, my children give me hope or whatever, but join us, like, get
Well,
busy.
she's saying it's our job to fix this.
Yeah, not to say, oh, you're the young people are gonna
It's like, give
fix
me
it.
your anger, not your hope.
Yeah, that's what I'm dealing with right now. The chapter I'm dealing with is how immigrants try to, if they couldn't be successful, that they're somehow ingesting in their children's success. And somehow they sort of delayed push forward this sort of issue, well, if I can't, I'm still working in the factory after 40 years and I'm still living in a not very good situation, my kids will be better, so, and that sort of stuff. But there was an encouragement to do that, okay, to get your kids' education, that sort of stuff. But I'm wondering to what extent that parents sort of use their kids as proxies for their own hopes. That they
Happens
ingest.
a lot.
It happens a lot, and that's good for kids too, because you're encouraging kids to move forward. But in some ways, it might be that parents are not thinking of what's in their kids' best interest. They're thinking about how they can somehow make sense of their lives through their children's lives. And whether that's whether that's good for the children. You know, the joke is not the immigrants are, my son the doctor, you know. And the whole idea is that by having your son be a doctor, not only will they a doctor, but I'm better off because, you know, I should feel good because my son is the doctor, okay?
But
So
you
was
would-
it about them or was it about,
But it would be only, it's not wrong to feel good that your son became a doctor when you were working in a factory. I mean,
You're proud.
yeah. I mean, wouldn't
proud for your son or proud for you?
maybe both. Why not? And what's wrong with that?
Did the son want to be the doctor?
Well, let's assume the son did want to be the
Yes,
doctor.
then we're fine.
Okay.
But,
But let's assume that the son.
but culturally,
Let's assume that the son maybe didn't really want to be a doctor, but has become a doctor and is good at being a doctor and is okay with being a doctor. It wasn't the son's passion. Maybe the son still harbors this dream that the son would have been a sculptor or a poet. But the son was kind of pushed into being, to medical school in subtle or unsubtle ways by the parent. But the son maybe is, at peace with that because the son sees the pluses of being a doctor,
As opposed to a sculptor.
Yeah, right. That the son had, yeah, and so it's not just. I think it can be shaded and nuanced. So under those
sociology is.
so under those, right, I'm telling
Some
you.
do, some don't.
So under those circumstances of where it's a mixed bag for the son.
But you can see where it could be negative too.
But
You
how
can see
many-
where,
I-
say the son doesn't want to
of
become a doctor,
course,
he lives his
there's-
whole life being a doctor and I want to be a
Sure.
sculptor.
Yes, and the son could be miserable and unbalanced. The son still is miserable, and then that would be probably a bad outcome.
But how many parents do we know when we inquire about their families that it's important for them to tell you that their adult children are doing this, that, and the other important thing?
Right.
I mean, have you noticed that?
Oh, sure.
We brag about our kids, and is that self-aggrandizement?
Well, I think
Or what level it is, at what level.
I think it is, Domenica, and
Yeah.
it's always a little surprising to me if I ask an adult how their children are doing, and they kind of, like it's shocking.
But
You
they
never
don't really
expect-
want to talk about it if it's,
Right, you
if
never
it's not
expect-
something good.
You never expect to
It's
hear
not
that.
always
We always,
Then we have Stefan here, right? Then we
And
have
I
Stefan
will.
here. Who's
not
been
to put
successful.
not to put them on the spot.
Yeah, and Stefan, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I would love to
Any of
hear
this?
from Stefan.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, thank you. I think going back to what Lou was saying, I think parents can create these sort of expectations or these hopes for what their children do. And I think a lot of it's based off of their own perspective. So if they didn't get much education, or if they weren't, in a good position financially growing up, I feel like that would lead them to kind of create this picture and say, this didn't go well in my life, these are my struggles. As a result, I want my child to, have a high-paying job. And I feel like a lot of it's just, what is the perspective of the parent? What were their own life experiences? And that really shapes what their expectations or what their hopes are for their own children.
And how is that for the children?
I think it depends really, is that what they want to do? How strong is the push to have a specific career or to pursue a specific path, and to what extent do they want to do that?
So do you have any peers who were pushed in a direction they didn't want to go and then go that way?
I don't know. Not that I know of,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know I think a lot of people my age, so 25, 24, 26, are still kind of figuring out what they want to do with their lives.
Some of us
A
are.
lot of us are.
It doesn't stop. So, Tony, did you
Yeah.
push your children to
Yeah.
not be farmers? Or
Thank
did
you.
did you,
Coming. Thanks for what you said.
direct your children in any way? Overtly? Kind of going off what Stefan said about the hardships, and the parents would want their children to not follow this path of hardship. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
I think 4 of them out of 5. I think they would have farmed. It was so hard. But, they don't want to put a family through that. You can learn something really important about hopeless situations. You can learn the resiliency and become it, but it can be so difficult and horrific that your loved ones don't want to have to do that. So fortunately, I think with them, all I said was, if you can do something, find something you really love and work for yourself, do that. If you can avoid working for somebody, do it, Just try to avoid having to work for somebody and being beholden to them. And
That's my fault, I needed to leave.
It's
So maybe
the back
it's the
door.
back?
Yeah.
and they've all done really a whole lot better than I did.
Oh.
But it seems like they have elements of still that farming in them, because they all do something like, don't they do something on the side too, that sort of related to the land? And
Yeah.
like you gave them that love, I think of that, the one raises puppies and one, and turkeys and, they do, and one's with horses and.
Well, 4 of them own their own property, and all of them have a good source of income, and 2 of them have farmsteads just like we do, and they're doing something else to support that. So, but it's not farming.
But it's interesting, I was looking at some data the other day with my students, and that they call it occupational inheritance, and they look at farmers, and it's like only 1 out of 10 sons whose fathers were farmers become farmers, so 10%. But of those kids of those sons who are farmers, 9 out of 10 had farming fathers. So if the son can become a farmer, he wants to be a farmer, okay? But the ability to become a farmer is only 10% because of the things you're talking about, buying up land, that stuff. So in some ways, I take that. I don't know. Farming is hard, but it's like enriching, and it's like it's a good life, and you're not somebody's person. But the ability to be a farmer is so difficult. So people go, even though it's enriching, I can't live a life this way. So I'm gonna go work in plumb.
One is a lineman for a utility company, and he makes really good money, and he owns a little property in the country, and he's working toward having enough money to buy a farm, and he's starting to buy equipment, and he pay it off in a year or two or
Wow.
cash it out. I never made that much money, but it would take us years to, we had to budget and reinvest and reinvest and reinvest. And
I don't think I'll be a farmer.
So your son's goal is to leave the line and go
just
to
to
the
have a,
farm.
just to have a
That's
farm.
tough.
Okay.
And but he's found a way that he can make 2 or 3 times as much income as I ever made, you
Right.
know. That will make that possible.
Okay.
And if, I mean, the land that was 800 an acre is now 33,000 an acre, if the land prices don't make it just astronomically
Right.
impossible.
Right.
Another
I don't care.
got an agribusiness degree and he works in agriculture, marketing.
Uh-huh.
And he also owns a farmstead and he's working toward paying that off and he's making good income. But there's a certain market that will sustain a farm without off-farm income. A certain number of acres that is sustainable, you know, and I never got there. I got really close, but it happened to be, when we got really close, it was 2009.
Yeah.
And most of our market was in the Chicago area.
And you dried up.
We lost, people moved away east when 1 in 4 mortgages was underwater in this metro area. We lost scads of people, and then at the same time, competition was just ramping up, and all of these schemes that Urban Shelley's Fresh Picks and Peapod and now Amazon, and it's just anything you want, 24/7, delivered to your door. And people telling us they have a subscription with a national or regional distributor. They belong to a farm. It's a national regional distributor. It's filling boxes from God knows where, in warehouses, and delivering to their doors. And it mimics what we did, you know, 8 to 10 varieties of vegetables, but it's all prepared, you know, it's all chopped, diced, with recipes, and all you gotta do is, you know,
Totally.
all this
Now I
stuff.
can't order from Urban Shelley. I didn't know about Urban Shelley.
Well, I don't really know all about it either, but from what I can see, I don't see, is it a farm? Is it, can you go there and volunteer? I mean, is it?
No, I doubt they'll let you go into the warehouse and help pack farm.
I've read-
Probably rules against that.
I've read more about
During the
Peapod than I
winter.
have about
Uh-huh.
the other, but it sounds so similar that I can't imagine it's not the same thing, but,
So I think we should kind of try to wrap this up. I really appreciate you
Tony.
coming and what you've shared with us.
well, I
It's been-
apologize if I
No,
rattle
no,
anybody, but.
No, Tony.
not at all. It was really.
We've been talking for a year and we need some new perspectives.
Yeah,
to-
that's certainly
Add
a new
another
perspective and
perspective
really
to our
appreciate it.
discussion.
Well, sometimes it's kind of like a Martian landed, I know, when I open my mouth in urban areas, oh, where did this guy come from?
I know, it's
You know,
so
We'll talk about you when you're not here.
They'll understand.
Well, and he's
after they
gonna-
drink some
And
wine,
he's gonna
they'll
talk
get it.
about us when he comes back.
I don't have anybody to talk to, so.
We're pretty safe on that one.
So does
why I invite her.
anybody wanna sort of have any closing, comments? We have our wine tasting at 4 and our dinner at 5 and the bounce house is still out there. And
What time is
to meet Jessica and it's almost 2:30 and John is still here with his
For John.
camera.
Thanks to John. Thank you.
Thank you.
But does anybody have anything?
Well, are we doing something as the winter hits? We're trying maybe
Yeah, I think
periodically meet again in homes, I guess, that sort of stuff, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
And the table's going inside pretty soon, so the table's,
Oh.
we're gonna, the
Where's it
table
gonna go?
in the basement somewhere or something like that,
Yeah.
but we, obviously, we can,
Meet in your basement.
oh, we can bring it to your houses if that would be
Yeah,
But-
one thing I've learned is that there seems to be endless possibilities of discussing this, that, you know,
It's funny.
we never seem to come to any sort of conclusion about, okay, this is what it is, and now we all agree, and there's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, right.
It's
Oh,
just-
that's interesting.
So many
Are you
facets.
pleased
to
with this?
it.
or-
No, I am, because it just continues, and we continue to find more ways to
Not 'cause
talk
that's it.
about it, and more perspectives that, you know, to come in and look
And
at.
more ways to talk to each other.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
other
Right,
part.
and then
Learn
I think-
about each other. I think that's part of it for
Right,
me, is the
and-
learning about each other.
You know, you view things from the circumstances, everybody's viewpoint is sort of couched in the circumstances of their own lives, and it's very interesting to, you know, have this contact and to know people on a, you know, a different,
Isn't it?
more intimate level, yeah.
And it's sort of a, like we're between, like, there's work's over here and there's family over here. Work is pretty unintimate, and family's pretty intimate. And I don't wanna be intimate with you guys, okay, cause that's family stuff, okay? But I don't wanna be like work, in which you're just, that we're trying to
Yeah,
create this sort of
right,
community in
right,
some ways,
right.
that somehow merges a little bit of more personal stuff. We live on the block, but we don't know each other that well. But we get to know each other a little better with certain sort of bounds in terms of how intimate we want to, you know, amongst community. So I think that's an interesting sort of form that we're trying to evolve in some ways.
Right.
And it keeps going, and it keeps going, yeah.
It keeps going.
And it's always interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna try a closing summary and see if this makes sense. Life is what happens as you're balancing hope and despair. That's what I've been hearing. That's your first comment about
That's interesting,
you know,
that's it.
just putting them both aside, you know, but it's the balancing, I think, in our life. That's really what we're doing.
But your
Get it
answer-
on t-shirts.
But your interesting point is life is what it happens, but life keeps going on
Right.
while you're trying to balance hope and
Yes,
despair.
yes,
And so
right.
the whole things are, you don't get to pull back and say, I'm gonna deal with hope now, or I'm gonna deal with, because it keeps going on. Every day is
It's a process, every day,
That's
exactly.
cool, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool way of looking at it.
Thank
Very good.
you.
Thank you
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
to Susan and Jim for
I was
hosting
picking
us.
up on your